On today's show, who stood out in the Habs Leafs rookie games? We'll talk about that on both teams for today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakesh, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the Habs Leafs rookie games from this past weekend. We both went to both games on Saturday and Sunday. And we have a lot to talk about on that side. So we'll talk about the standouts on the Habs side first and foremost in the first segment. We'll talk about the Leafs standouts in the second segment. And lastly, we'll talk about the surprise standouts for both teams, either invites or late round picks who really impressed in this tournament. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. Let's get started right away here with the Habs standouts from this past weekend. And I think we can start at the very top here with the main standout, the guy who took this team by force and led it on basically every shift, Lane Hutson. How did you find his couple of games there, and how does that bode for what's going to happen moving forward? Because there's chatter about whether Hudson's going to start in the NHL or the AHL. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of different aspects of Lane Hutson's game in these two matchups versus the Leafs prospect. On the one hand, he was the most dynamic creator on the ice for either team in both of these games. The amount of skill and creativity and dynamism that he constantly brought shift after shift after shift really continuously shifted the game. And I thought that he was constantly getting involved offensively. We saw him break many ankles and had some fun with the puck on his stick. He wasn't afraid of trying things and turned the puck over a couple of times and then immediately on the back check went and got it back. I also did think that we saw some limitations in his game, especially defensively and being physically overpowered or beaten to the outside, and Toronto forwards really taking advantage of some of the limitations in his lateral mobility and his pivots, especially while defending the rush. And beyond that, offensively, I also thought that there were stretches of these games where Lane Hutson was kind of struggling to get around pressure, and he was very much being shepherded towards the boards and was kind of like pinballing between the periphery on either side of the ice, but was struggling to really access the dangerous areas, and certainly got to those dangerous areas quite a few times throughout these games. But we did see the Toronto defense learn how to contain him a bit more as this tournament wore on. But overall, fantastic player, very dynamic, but we did see some of the limitations in this game. And while I do think he will crack the Habs lineup out of training camp, I think he's so skilled that he's going to be a difference maker for this team this season. There are going to be some speed bumps along the way for him, but I think he'll be playing top 4 minutes by year's end.
Absolutely. And I think overall the top four, I mean, for the Habs was, we're talking about 4 really good defenseman prospects here. We'll talk about Lane Hutson's D partner, Logan Mailloux, who also had a decent tournament. I think he's gotten way better at kind of handling 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 situations. Once it comes to multi-variable scenarios, that's always been the issue with Mailloux. As soon as you add 2-3 teammates, 2-3 opponents, things kind of break down very quickly. He's not the best at making really quick, accurate reads. But the speed, the mobility, the range, the physicality, his one-on-one stick work in terms of rush defense was really good in this tournament, even against the likes of Cowan and Minton and those guys. So that at least wasn't a concern. And I thought offensively he continued to show what makes Logan Mailloux, which is this absolute boom of a shot. Score a goal basically from the corner right into the top right corner of the net above the goalie's shoulder there to tie the game late in the matchup. And overall was just, fairly solid, fairly reliable defensively. And although he was fairly static offensively, he was mainly staying in the same spots throughout the offensive zone shift. I thought he was still able to leverage and exploit the things that make his offense work. So I think he had a decent tournament next to Hutson there, but Hutson was very much a play driver. Mailloux was delegating a lot to Hutson on that pairing in terms of breakouts, in terms of, passing in the offensive zone. But that's a step up from what we've seen before from Mailloux, which is basically he gets the puck and shoots at every chance he gets. So I was actually happy to see a couple passes laterally there to Hutson. We can also talk about the second pair there. We have Adam Engstrom and David Reinbacher had a really good tournament. Engstrom especially had some struggles at the start. His first period on Saturday wasn't really good, but since that point, he was really stellar. And you notice immediately with Engstrom the skating. It's a step above Hutson, Mailloux, Reinbacher, basically anyone else on the Habs lineup, or anyone on both lineups really. His skating is phenomenal, right?
Absolutely. Like both of the games, like I had a very different view from you in these two games. Like you were up in the press box, so you had the true bird's eye. I had the first viewing, not much scouting analysis to be done because I was in the second row. I was right next to the Habs bench, so didn't really have any vantage to see what was going on. But I was right in on the action. It was very fun. But in the second game, I had a really decent bird's eye view from the 200s right around center ice. But yeah, I thought that Engstrom was, especially like in yesterday's game when I actually had the vantage to see like how his skating was creating advantages all over the ice and just how much ground he was covering. Yeah, like he was a real step above everybody else on either lineup, as you mentioned. And the Habs have some fantastic skaters, especially on this blue line, right? Like, I mean, David Reinbacher is a premier skater, but Engstrom, with the fluidity of his movement and the amount of power that he's able to generate in his crossovers, both forwards and backwards, like really, really impressive. So yeah, I was very happy to see that from Engstrom, and I thought that the puck moving abilities shone very bright. He was constantly getting pucks towards the middle lane, and in the offensive zone, he was really playing some really nice give and goes with David Reinbacher on that blue line. And they're both like two-way defensemen that don't necessarily shine their brightest in the offensive zone. But I thought that together they were really outthinking the Toronto defense and consistently getting the puck to dangerous spots. So it was definitely a strong pairing, and to have that as their second pairing in a rookie tournament was definitely a luxury for Montreal. But it wasn't quite enough to win either of these games. I thought that some goaltending mishaps did not necessarily help the Habs here. But I thought in both games, Montreal was creating more chances than Toronto was, but they weren't getting the same bounces. And Toronto's goaltending was fantastic here with both Dennis Hildeby and Artur Akhtyamov, who we're going to talk about in the next segment. But overall, the Habs decor I thought was fantastic. But there's still a couple of forwards that we wanted to talk about here. So talk me through a player that you were chatting to me about before we started recording here, and Jared Davidson, who you've seen a lot of progression from since his draft year, where he was a D+2 with really subpar skating, but the intelligence and the goal scoring ability, the shot, have all taken big steps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even the skating's come in decent ways. He was able to get around the ice. He was able to cut inside pressure in the offensive zone. I thought he was really reliable in all three zones and consistently energetic. He was able to put in second and third efforts, win pucks back, was jumping on rebounds, recycling possession for his team in the offensive zone. I thought it was really, really good in this tournament as well. So Davidson definitely gets a gold star for me for what he did in this tourney. But Owen Beck and Sean Farrell were really the kind of central focal points of this offense. Beck was, I mean, in the second game, I thought he was having a lot more fun than in this first segment and in the first game.
Definitely.
With Beck, what's really great is when he's having fun, that's when he's at his best. Because he's a fairly serious guy. If you ever talk to him, he's a very mature, very, kind of straightforward type of player who, he's a professional. You can see it when he's playing. When he lets loose and starts having fun, starts deking, starts shooting through legs, starts, trying passes that he wouldn't normally under different circumstances and different positions in the lineup, that's when Beck's at his best. And I thought he had a really good impact on this team in all three zones. And Sean Farrell, for me, was the best playmaker on both teams. Just the passing ability on this kid it's always been the strength. And although he's improved both his tendency to shoot and his abilities in the shot, I still think he's a premier playmaker first and foremost, and that's going to continue to kind of drive his game as he moves forward. I'd be surprised if he cracks the Habs lineup this year, but he's still got some decent abilities, regarding what he can do. And I'm rooting for him always and constantly.
Me too. I'm a massive fan of Sean Farrell, and during yesterday's game, I was sitting next to a dad and his young son, and the son was asking his dad if there was any Olympians on the Habs roster, and the dad was like, I'm not sure, and I was like, there is one. There's Sean Farrell, who actually scored the most points for Team USA at the Olympics 2 years ago, the same one where Slavkovsky shone brightly, and then for the rest of the game, Sean Farrell had a number one fan in that stadium, and it was like a 6-year-old kid sitting next to me. Every time that he got the puck on his stick, there was a big cheer and a lot of fun in that crowd. And I mean, overall, I think if we're talking about the games themselves, getting 20,000 people in the arena for both of these rookie tournament games with the $10 tickets, the family outings, the atmosphere was fantastic. Yesterday we had like a wave going around the arena like 8 or 9 times in the third period.
During
So
the
the
ad break
longer
too.
during the ad break. It was one of the longer waves I've seen at the Bell Center, period. And it was a prospect game in September. It was wonderful stuff. And overall, a really fun event that I hope continues in the coming seasons.
Absolutely. We love hockey in Montreal. We missed it dearly. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into the second segment where we talk about the Leafs standouts. There's a bunch of players to talk about here. We'll get into them in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you in these couple of weeks here. Between now and September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Whether you want to take your swings on American football or European football with the Champions League kicking off this week, the choice is yours. Or maybe you're a golf or a tennis fan. FanDuel has things for any type of sports fan, and you can just take your swings with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here where we're going to talk about the Leafs standouts. And there's a bunch of players to talk about here. They won both games and they had a lot of really good players. I want to start in net though, because I think that's really the main drastic difference between these two teams. The Habs had two camp invites in net in Matteo Drobats and Samuel Richard.
Sorry to interrupt you, but like the Habs had also had Quentin Miller, who's going to be playing the games, and he got like a really nasty injury the day before the first of these games. So it was very much a last-minute shift as well.
Yeah, he's out for 6 months. It's going to be a long time. But regardless, let's focus on the Leafs here. Dennis Hildeby, Artur Akhtiyama, fantastic goaltenders. There's some promise between the pipes going up for the Leafs there. Let's start with Hildeby because I think he had the better game of the two goalies here. Really, really standout player. Incredibly mobile in net, really using his frame incredibly well in order to stay square to the puck. Rarely had to make difficult saves, was constantly just in the right position, with the right depth in the crease. That's all footwork. Goalies who rarely have to face bad shots, it's mainly because of their positioning, their awareness, and their footwork. Being able to stay square to shots is a difficult thing when the puck is moving east-west very quickly like it does in the NHL, or even when you're playing against the likes of Lane Hutson and Logan Mailloux at the point. Those two were exchanging the puck a ton. Sean Farrell was making some cross-ice passes. So Hildeby had to be really, he had to stay on his toes, be really aware of what was going on, and I think he did a fantastic job of that. First and foremost, I think in terms of the standouts, he's #1 for me in this tournament so far, right?
I would agree. I think that as you mentioned, like the combination of frame and just consistent positioning, paired with also really good puck tracking, made him a massive standout in that first game. I thought that there were like maybe 1 or 2 sequences in the entire game where he didn't know where the puck was. He was constantly getting his eyes on the puck, and being 6'7" can help with that. And the Habs, I mean, apart from that 1/3 line, not the biggest forward lineup in terms of actually blocking his view, and even those guys weren't really able to screen him with his massive frame. But as you mentioned, he was fantastic. But Artur Akhtiyama was also really good yesterday. He only played the first half of the game as they made a goalie swap about 30 minutes into that matchup. But I was impressed with him as well. I thought he was very controlled, very composed, mobile as well, and very consistent depth in his crease as well. I thought that he looked very comfortable between his posts, and it did not seem like a massive challenge for him in that game in the 30 minutes he did play. And obviously the Habs came back to make it close towards the end, but that was only after they had made the goalie switch in net. Yep. So I thought that both goaltenders were fantastic. But other players that also stood out here for Toronto, like we can't go without talking about Easton Cowan any longer here. I thought he was
Of course not.
excellent. He was so good, and by far the best forward and on either team in these games. And the amount of pace he had, constantly attacking the middle of the ice, whether it was on at even strength or on the power play, consistently finding dangerous ice, whether it was on or off puck, and consistently also shooting through Montreal defensemen. And he had his work cut out for him. Like obviously Montreal's like top four in the blue line was really good, and like the third pairing was no slouch either, with Emmanuelson, Charbonneau, and Owen Protz. But he was constantly just buzzing around the Montreal crease, and playing an Easton Cowan brand of hockey. He had some really gorgeous passes and playmaking efforts in there as well, and just found a way to be dangerous in just about any way he possibly could. So he stood out massively for me.
Absolutely. We also have to talk about Fraser Minton. I thought it was great in this tournament before. Unfortunately, he got injured in the second game. Not sure. I don't think we had we've had a prognosis or a diagnostic so far about what exactly happened, but overall, I thought Minton had a great tournament. Used his inside, his ability to move inside pressure to get to the middle of the ice. He was playing the net front really well, recycling pucks, playing really well defensively. I thought Cowan and Minton were, for me, by far the best forwards on both teams in this tournament. In this couple of games. And overall, I think that's I don't think that's even a question. But they did play with Ronnie Hirvonen in their second game on the first line there as their winger, and I thought Hirvonen had a great game. He scored 2 goals. Used his dynamic speed, his ability to kind of shift defenses, to use his hands in order to kind of get past one layer of pressure. He was playing really well. And constantly overwhelming the Habs defense, which is not a bad defense. Like that's a top 4 AHL caliber defense that they were playing against. And that line did really, really well. But in terms of other players to mention here, I think Nikita Grabyankin had a great tournament as well. Tournament. I keep saying that. Couple of games. Nikita Grabyankin.
It felt like a tournament. It felt like a rookie tournament. But
kind of did, for sure. But Grabyankin played really well as well. I thought his skill and power was really, really good. He had a nifty little shootout attempt in the first game. Where he tried to do the Forsberg there. It didn't work out, but you love to see the daring.
It's close.
Yeah, and he played really well last year in the KHL, right?
Absolutely. He had like 40 plus points in 60 something games last season. And playing a rookie tournament is a different thing from playing KHL minutes for an entire season in the top 6. So he looked very comfortable in these games to me. And he played, I think, the first period and a half or 2 periods on the first line in the first game for Toronto. And I thought that he was a really standout piece there. And as you mentioned, the shootout attempt was super fun. That was, I had like a front row seat to that one. I was right in front of me, and the goaltender really did bite on the move, but he didn't quite get far enough around the outstretched pad. But overall, I thought that he was really good. But one more player I really want to mention, and the only Leafs defenseman that I thought was like fantastic in these games, Topi Niemela. He was really good in my opinion. I was very impressed. I thought that the rest of the decor in Toronto was a bit more hit or miss, but in the end did enough to contain Montreal. But Niemela, both with and without the puck, was the leader on that blue line. With the puck on his stick in transition, he was constantly. I thought he was very manipulative with the puck on his stick, very patient and composed under pressure, constantly waiting for passing lanes to open themselves up to him rather than forcing things. And in the offensive zone, he was a really good distributor of the puck and quarterback from the blue line. And even defensively, despite not being the biggest of blue liners, I thought that he did a really, really good job at matching footwork off the rush, really pushing Montreal to the perimeter, and doing his job against the cycle. Like obviously not the best at boxing out players at the net front, because again he's a 6-foot defenseman, but overall I thought that he was playing with intelligence and composure and really made a difference for Toronto here.
Yeah, he definitely controlled play from that blue line. But we have some more surprise standouts to talk about here soon. We'll get into that in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's move on to our surprise standouts from both teams here. Players who we didn't really expect to really make a splash, but really showed some interest there. We're either talking late round picks, players either we weren't really high on, weren't expecting much from. or just invites to the tournament. We can start off with the third line for Montreal through both of these games. The "oh my god, he's dead" line. Tyler Thorpe,
Yeah.
Florian Xhekaj, and Tuch. Three massive, physical, violent forwards who played together on this line and kind of give pretty much exactly what we were expecting and more. So let's talk about the more that they give, because I think we were both expecting the violence and aggression and post-whistle shenanigans that they both brought, right?
Yeah, that wasn't the biggest shock. I mean, Florian Xhekaj dropped the gloves within what, like a minute of the first
Yeah.
game. It did not take very long at all for him to get involved. But overall, I was very impressed with this line. Like, of course, the physicality, the violence, the middle drive are all things that we knew were going to happen with this trio. But I was very impressed with actually the soft skill elements of some of these of some of the flashes that they showed. I thought that the goal in which Xhekaj and Thorpe combined in the second game in the third period to start things off to make it 3-3 was really, really nice. Xhekaj had a really nice little like hook pass to access the middle lane, and Thorpe with a quick like two-touch play and just lifted the puck over the goaltender's shoulder. But overall, I thought that these guys spent the overwhelming majority of their time in the offensive zone, were a real pain to get the puck away from, and were really solid on the cycle. They're playing with pace. They weren't holding onto the puck for too long, and really, really like working in tandem with their blue liners to keep the cycle going. And there were a couple sequences where they had the puck in the offensive zone for like over a minute in each of these games. So I was very impressed with this with these three guys here.
Absolutely. Yeah. They brought so much kind of just, I mean, obviously forechecking, pressure, violence, all that, but there was also a surprising amount of finesse of those three. And Tuch, especially, I was pretty surprised with, some small details of finesse that he's added to his game, his ability to make a quick pass under a stick and transition, his ability to kind of delay, find another lane, that kind of stuff. He was still, I don't think his decision making is as good as it could be, but he showed a bit more finesse than I've pretty much ever seen in his first like 2-3 years at BU. It's only in his final year at BU where it really kind of unlocked for him. So yeah, overall, fairly impressed with him as well. But let's talk about Emmanuel Charbonneau, who really shocked both of us here. He was the third pairing right shot defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens, a camp invite, didn't get drafted, 20 years old, 6'3", right-handed D, showed a lot of mobility, a decent amount of skill. I wouldn't say necessarily physicality, but he wasn't shy from getting involved in battles either. And was defending his teammates and his goaltender after whistles and stuff like that. So showed a very multifaceted, very versatile game, right?
Absolutely. I think the thing that impressed me the most was his composure under pressure. He was constantly drawing players in and making plays through them or around them, and waiting for them to open up space behind them in the space that they vacated. And thought that there was a decent amount of deception and manipulation in this game, which I just hadn't been expecting for I mean, 6'3" right shot defenseman out of the queue who's the camp invite. Like I think with that profile, I was expecting a bit more physicality, a bit less like nuanced manipulation in his game. But I was very, very impressed. And as you mentioned, the mobility, the agility was also really solid, and the level of skill with the puck on his stick also stood out among the Montreal decor. I thought, like if you compare him with like his pairing mate Owen Protz, the amount of finesse in the games was a big difference. Obviously, Protz has the booming shot and the relentless physicality, including a forecheck in the second game. He was like a forechecker for like 2 or 3 shifts. Yeah. It's like, okay, Owen Pross, that's fun. But Charbonneau was just a really constant presence on the blue line. He wasn't really pinching or activating too much offensively, but from the blue line, he was really moving the puck well. Kept his puck touches relatively short, and his pace stood out to me too. So he was definitely a player I enjoyed watching yesterday.
Yeah, and one more prospect I want to highlight here for Montreal was Charles Savoie, the fourth-line winger who was a camp invite to this tournament and really impressed in these games. He's not necessarily the most physical guy, but he outworks everyone on the ice, outthinks players really, really well. And every time that Charles Savoie was moved up the lineup, whether that was on the second line for a while with Jared Davidson and Riley Kidney, or whether that was, playing on in the same 5-man unit as Lane Hutson and Logan Mailloux, I thought he was really, really good. And he got 2 primary assists in the second game. Really impressed me with his motor, his pace, his energy, his decision-making, his thought process. There were just so many layers to his ability to impact the game for Montreal that I really thought he was going to earn himself a move up the lineup, but at the same time, I understand you can't really split up the third line, Tuch, Xhekaj, and Thorpe, and you can't really. I mean, the only other option is to downgrade Philip Meshar, and that's not really good for his confidence. So I understand him being stuck on that fourth line, but every single time that he played with players up the lineup, I thought it was great. And this is the type of player that usually earns himself an AHL contract or an ECHL contract, and kind of uses that as a springboard for their career. When you show the clutch ability, the ability to step up your game when the stakes are high, when potentially your career's on the line, because Savoie's going to U Sports if it's not for a contract here with Montreal, with Concordia University. So your ability to step up your game to play well with high end prospects in a game as important and for his career as this is, I thought that was commendable, and definitely I want to highlight him. He's also from my hometown in Quebec, Saint Eustache. Prospect I'm definitely rooting for moving forward. But let's move on to the three standouts here, the three surprise standouts we have for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we'll start with the fourth line center, Miroslav Holinka. He's a prospect I think we were both kind of fairly high on. We thought he would probably be a late round pick in the 2024 NHL draft. What'd you think of his tournament overall, his couple of games overall?
I thought he was really solid. He was efficient. He was versatile. He could play decently in all three zones. I don't think that he necessarily stood out in terms of like breakneck pace or overwhelming skill or anything, but he was a hard worker for Toronto, and I thought at both ends of the ice he was making decent reads. He was getting into the positions where his team needed him most, and I thought that he had a couple sequences where his handling skills shown on the rush as well. But there were many different facets of his game that I thought looked decent in this tournament, and his minutes were obviously a bit more limited, playing on that fourth line for most of it. He definitely left a positive impression, but one player that I actually noticed significantly more than Holinka was Braden Kressler. He was getting really involved physically. He had he got hit by Tyler Thorpe big time in the first game, and then followed that up by hitting Tyler Thorpe like two shifts afterwards, leaving Thorpe with like stitches that he had to get. It was a really, really big hit from a player who's significantly smaller than Tyler Thorpe, the 6'4" behemoth is, and he was just he never stopped working. He was a real buzzsaw there for the Maple Leafs, and I thought that he was doing a really good job at also opening up ice for his teammates in the offensive zone.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Kressler, what is he, 5'10"? Like putting Tyler Thorpe, 6'3", 200-pound Tyler Thorpe on his butt with a hit for any 5'10" player is difficult. So you got to commend the willingness to go for that, because that could have gone really wrong for Kressler, and the ability to pull it off successfully. But also I want to highlight Noah Chadwick, who had a really good tournament, playing first pair of minutes in the first game next to Topi Niemela. I thought he supported him really well, made some really good, smart heads-up decisions, and moved the puck really quickly. And so that really combined fairly well with what Niemela brings to the game. So I thought both of them played off each other really well. And then the second game, he was demoted to the second pairing, and Cade Weber, 6'7", I want to say, Cade Weber took his spot on the first pairing. And I understand it at the same time, because Chadwick isn't the biggest guy, not necessarily the most physical guy, but you want to have a bit of balance. And I thought that Chadwick and Parsons on the second pairing, I think that was better for Chadwick, because then he was able to drive play, to be the dictator, to be the guy who moved the puck up the ice, who kind of took control of the play. But I still think that Chadwick had his best moments next to Niemela. So that's also a good sign for me, because a prospect who plays better with more intelligent, more skilled players, usually you don't really struggle when you're going up the ranks, right? So I'm looking forward to see what Noah Chadwick becomes as a left-handed defenseman, because he's got some decent skill on him as well. So I keep an eye on him. If I'm a Leafs fan, he's a decent prospect. I think he could develop really well. But that wraps things up for our episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the months of September. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.